I always got my coffee at the same place, at the same time, even though I told myself it didn't matter. There was a rhythm to it. The whir of the espresso machine, the soft scrape of cups against saucers, the quiet clink of coins on the counter. That's where I first noticed her. She was leaning over the pastry case when I walked in, mid-40s, hair pinned up a little too tightly for comfort, and glasses slipping down her nose. I don't know why it stuck with me. Maybe it was the way she hesitated, like she didn't want to seem too curious, or maybe it was just how natural she looked, even in a crowded coffee shop. "Large black?" she asked, as though she'd read my mind. I froze, fingers brushing my wallet. Yeah," I said a little too fast. She smiled, not at me exactly, but with that quiet acknowledgement that made it feel like she did. I noticed her hands flick, almost unconsciously, over the edge of the counter, then back to her notes. Small, human gestures. I ended up at the corner table, my laptop open, but my attention wasn't really on the screen. Every few minutes, I found myself glancing toward her. She was writing something, underlined in neat, precise handwriting, occasionally tapping a pen against her lips. I folded a napkin once, more to ground myself than anything, and caught her looking up. Our eyes met for a second longer than necessary. It wasn't flirtation, not in any obvious way. It was something quieter, something curious. Later, when I went to get sugar, she asked, "Do you come here often?" And I stammered, "Yeah, mornings mostly." I wanted to say something else, something clever or normal, but the words didn't come. Instead, we both laughed softly, the kind of laugh that isn't funny but is necessary anyway. Back at my table, I noticed I hadn't touched my laptop in over 10 minutes. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from someone I hadn't replied to in weeks. I stared at it and deleted it. It didn't matter. Not compared to this quiet, ordinary attention from someone who didn't even know my name yet. She remembered my coffee. She even remembered I liked it without sugar. That should have been nothing, but it wasn't. I found myself overthinking the tilt of her head, the soft way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the subtle crease in her forehead when she concentrated. At some point, she packed her bag, and our eyes met again. She didn't say anything, just nodded slightly, like we'd both acknowledged something invisible. I wanted to ask if she wanted to meet after class, or even just for coffee again, but my voice caught. My hand hovered over the chair across from mine, then dropped. I walked out, my backpack heavy, the air a little colder than I expected. Outside, I hesitated at the corner, wondering if she'd already left. Then my phone buzzed. I fished it out, thinking it was a spam message or a class reminder. It wasn't. It was her. "See you in class tomorrow?" I blinked. My heart, quietly, like a pulse beneath skin, went just a little faster. And just like that, a routine morning had become a question I didn't know how to answer. The next day, I found her in the back of the lecture hall before class, already unpacking her papers. She gave me a small nod. No big greeting, just acknowledgement. It was enough to make me hesitate at the doorway longer than I intended. After class, she lingered while I packed up my laptop. "Do you ever just not want to leave?" she asked, almost as an afterthought. I shrugged. "Sometimes, especially mornings like this." She smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth tugging up. "I liked mornings like this when I taught at the old college. You could feel the day stretch out ahead. Before, well, before everything got complicated." Her words were light, casual, but I noticed the pause after complicated, like she'd said something she hadn't meant to, or didn't know how to explain. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. There's a strange weight in curiosity when you're not sure you're allowed to carry it. We ended up sitting at the corner table again. She poured tea from her thermos into 2 small cups, her hands brushing mine for a second. I caught the warmth there and held it longer than necessary. The steam curled between us, ordinary and intimate at the same time. I wanted to ask about her life, about the divorce she'd hinted at once, or the years of teaching that had shaped her, but my voice faltered. Instead, I told a half-truth about staying up late with assignments, leaving out that it wasn't really the work keeping me awake. She laughed quietly. Not at me, Not at anything in particular, but at a shared understanding that neither of us explained. "Do you ever imagine?" she started, then stopped, shaking her head. I didn't push. Some confessions don't need words. The silence between us stretched, heavy with things unsaid. I noticed the little things, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear again, the slight crease between her brows, the soft tap of her foot against the chair leg. Every small gesture seemed amplified, like I was hearing it through headphones. Finally, she reached over and lightly touched the sleeve of my hoodie. Not a grab, not a push, just a brush, a deliberate pause that lingered longer than comfort should allow. My stomach turned in that familiar, quiet way, a little too aware, a little too nervous, and entirely awake. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought as we packed up to leave. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Or maybe because it felt dangerous in the simplest, most ordinary way. As we walked out together, she carried her cup carefully, and I carried my half-formed courage. Neither of us spoke. The hallway was empty except for the echo of our footsteps. And when we reached the door, she paused, glanced at me with something in her eyes that didn't have a name, and said, softly, "See you tomorrow?" It was ordinary, banal even. But somehow it wasn't. I waited outside her office after class, leaning against the wall like it wasn't the exact thing I shouldn't be doing. She came out slower than usual, papers in hand, eyes not quite meeting mine at first. "Hey," I said. Too casual. My fingers itched to do something, anything. "Hey," she replied, folding the papers against her chest. Then she paused. I have to run a meeting. Maybe later." Later. My chest tightened. Later was soft, polite, uncertain. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Sure. Later." I watched her leave, the doors swinging shut behind her. My heartbeat settled into that hollow rhythm, part longing, part self-admonishment. Back at the coffee shop that afternoon, I found myself tracing the rim of my mug with my thumb, imagining her sitting across from me, her pen tapping, her lips slightly parted when she laughed. Then my friend, Mark, slid into the booth beside me. "Dude, you're staring again," he said, grinning, shaking his head. I flushed. "No, just thinking." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Uh-huh, thinking." I wanted to say something about her, the way she moved, the way she made the ordinary feel like it mattered. But instead, I changed the subject. That was easier. Silence was easier. The next morning, I caught her in the stairwell. She was adjusting the strap of her bag, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd notice me. "Morning," I said. "Morning," she replied, eyes flicking past me, like she had somewhere to be. We walked together for a few steps. Almost nothing was said, but almost everything was communicated. I noticed the curve of her neck, the slight lift of her chin, her hand brushing against mine as she shifted the bag. My pulse jumped. Then a student from another class appeared, greeting her loudly. She turned, distracted, and I felt myself receding, like gravity had reversed. I wanted to say something, a joke, a comment, but the words caught in my throat. We parted at the door. I lingered too long, watching her walk away. I wanted to step forward, to say something unthinkable, maybe even touch her arm. But I didn't. Later, my thoughts looped endlessly. Maybe she felt it too. Maybe she didn't. Maybe it was impossible. My coffee had gone cold. The clock ticked too loud. My hands rested on the table, idle and restless. That night, I texted her, then deleted it. Not right, I told myself. Not right. But my thumb hovered over the screen for a full minute. And then, in the stairwell the next day, she paused, glanced at me in that way that felt almost like permission. My chest tightened, my thoughts tangled. Our faces were inches apart, the air thick. My mouth opened, words caught. But before anything could happen, someone else's voice echoed from the hall. Her hand brushed mine, accidental, deliberate, maybe both. And then she stepped back. "See you in class," she said, lighter than she felt. I stood there, heart pounding, hands empty, mind full. Almost, I thought. Almost. It was quiet that evening in the park behind campus, the kind of quiet that made every footstep echo. I hadn't planned to meet her, but there she was, sitting on the far end of the bench, her bag at her feet, phone resting face down. I walked slowly, not wanting to startle her. She glanced up when I sat down, eyes meeting mine just long enough to make my chest tight. "You're late," she said softly. Not accusatory, just a statement. "Traffic," I mumbled. My hands fidgeted in my lap. For a while, we didn't speak. We just watched the shadows stretch over the grass, the wind brushing leaves along the path. I wanted to say something, anything, but my words refused to line up. Then she laughed quietly at a memory she was telling herself more than me. I noticed her hand reach for her scarf, twisting it around her fingers. A small, nervous gesture. I shouldn't be here," I said finally. My voice was low, uneven. "I mean with you. Not that I don't want to. It's just, maybe I shouldn't." She looked at me, tilting her head slightly, eyes soft but cautious. "Why not?" "Because everything about this was wrong. I was a student. She was older. She'd been through things I couldn't untangle. And yet, none of that stopped the pull. I wanted to reach for her, to say the words that hovered in my chest, but instead, I breathed. Deep, measured, pretending it was just the cool air. "I don't know," I admitted, quieter than I meant to. "It's complicated, and I think about it too much. About us. About what it would mean." Her gaze dropped to the scarf again, fingers still twisting. "Me too," she said finally. Her voice was near a whisper. More than I should. The wind picked up, ruffling the edges of her papers. She glanced at them, then back at me. And for a second, it felt like we were both holding our breath, waiting, daring each other to cross the invisible line we'd built over weeks of quiet mornings and lingering looks. I imagined leaning closer, just a little, feeling her there. But the moment stretched too long, too fragile, and my chest ached with the weight of wanting and knowing. She shifted on the bench, brushing against my hand almost deliberately, then pulling back, as if testing something unspoken. My fingers twitched. My heart hammered. "Why do we keep doing this?" I asked finally, almost to myself, almost too soft to be heard. Her eyes met mine again, steady, careful, and I realized the truth. She felt it too. Every hesitant step, every glance, every pause, every unsent message. But then she stood, gathering her bag. "Class tomorrow," she said. And her words hung between us, simple, ordinary, but loaded. And just like that, the tension didn't break, didn't resolve. It hovered, waiting. I sat there, empty bench beside me, wind in my hair, and thought, maybe tomorrow, maybe never. But the question stayed, silent, between us. She didn't show up the next morning. Not in the stairwell, not in class, not even in the cafe afterward. I sat at our usual table, coffee cooling, staring at the chair across from me. It was empty, as if it had always been empty, but I knew better. I tried to tell myself she was busy, something important had come up. Maybe a meeting, maybe a late class. But every time I imagined her smiling at someone else, brushing past me without notice, the chest-tightening pang returned. Then came the whispered rumor. A classmate mentioned she had a kid, a teenager, apparently, and divorced years ago. Nothing more, just a passing comment. I didn't know if it was true. I didn't ask. But the detail lodged itself in my mind like a pebble, rolling around every time I tried to think about her without complication. I started showing up later, staying less time, pretending indifference. My notebook stayed closed. My laptop barely opened. I folded napkins instead of writing. I imagined her reading messages I didn't send, seeing me hesitate in hallways, passing doors I didn't knock on. And then she appeared. At first glance, normal. Warm coffee in her hands, scarf slightly askew, that quiet tilt of her head. But she didn't look at me. Not really. She waved at someone behind me, smiled, laughed softly. I wanted to call out, to cross the floor and sit beside her. I didn't. Instead, I sat, frozen, watching her back straighten, her steps quicken. The thermos she carried swung just enough for me to notice. Small, ordinary, and full of meaning I shouldn't attach. I imagined every scenario. A reconciliation with someone from her past, a decision she'd made without me, a life she kept neatly separated. My chest felt empty, heavy, full all at once. The quiet pang wasn't heartbreak. It wasn't sorrow. It was a pause, the kind that stops time without explanation. By afternoon, I'd written a text, deleted it, rewritten it, deleted it again. The phone stayed on the table, its screen dark. The words unsent. I noticed. I'm here. Do you need me? I walked past her building, hoping for a glimpse, a nod, anything familiar. The door stayed closed. My hand lingered near the handle for longer than it should have. I didn't knock. At night, I sat on my bed, replaying every small moment from the week. The brush of her hand, the tilt of her chin, the way her eyes softened when she looked at me. Each memory became sharper, more fragile. I tried to remember why it mattered so much, tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a passing curiosity. But it wasn't nothing, and I couldn't finish the sentence. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I found her in the lobby of her building that evening, carrying groceries like any other ordinary day. The hum of the hallway lights felt louder than it should. She looked up when I stopped in the doorway. Her eyes widened slightly. Not surprise, not alarm, just recognition. Hey, I said, my voice barely above the hum of the refrigerator she'd passed on the way in. Hey, she replied, placing her bags down on the counter. She hesitated, twisting her keys in her hand. We stood there for a long moment, just breathing, both aware of how small the space between us felt. I wanted to say something, everything and nothing all at once, but the words lodged in my throat. Finally, she sighed, the sound quiet, controlled, almost like she was testing herself. I didn't expect to see you. Yeah, I said. My hands itched to reach for her, but I kept them folded over my backpack strap. I've been meaning to. She tilted her head, letting me continue, letting me fail. Meaning to, she prompted softly. I swallowed. I don't know. Say something. Anything. I guess. I just wanted to be honest. Her eyes softened, tracing the line of my jaw, my hands, lingering just slightly too long on the strap I gripped. She put her groceries down fully now, hands resting lightly on the edge of the counter, body open but hesitant. I'm scared, I admitted, almost to myself. Not that I want this, but that I want this. She blinked slowly, and for a moment, it felt like the weight of all our small gestures, the coffee mornings, the shared silences, the near touches, was concentrated in her gaze. I think, she said finally, her voice quiet, careful. I was scared too, of what it would mean, of everything we haven't said. The air between us didn't fill with fireworks or urgency. It settled, warm and heavy, a room full of quiet truths finally spoken. I stepped a little closer, careful, not too close, just enough that our shoulders nearly brushed. She didn't move away. She didn't step forward. She just let it exist. I exhaled, long, slow, the tension leaving in a steady stream. Okay, I said softly. Just one word. Enough. She smiled faintly, a small tilt of her lips, and it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a declaration. It was a recognition of the fragility, the care, the honesty between us. Okay, she echoed. And for the first time in weeks, the unsent messages, the missed meetings, the empty chairs, none of it mattered in that moment. Just the quiet, human connection of two people finally naming what they'd been feeling, carefully, without losing themselves or each other. I left her lobby that night lighter, not because everything was solved, but because the pause had ended, because we'd both chosen, in the smallest, quietest way, to step forward. Weeks passed. Class ended, deadlines shifted, routines changed. Yet somehow, mornings still felt like hours. I kept showing up at the coffee shop at 8:47 a.m., and she usually did too, her thermos in hand, a small smile ready before she even looked up. We never announced anything, never made promises. We just existed in the same rhythm. A shared table, shared glances, tea poured across the counter, black coffee exactly how I liked it. Little habits became markers of connection. A folded napkin here, a forgotten pen there, a scarf tossed over a chair. One Saturday, we ended up on the old park bench behind campus. Sunlight streamed through the leaves, soft and diffuse, brushing her hair and warming my shoulders. She sipped her tea, I my coffee, and we didn't speak for a while. Just watched, just existed. "You still think about the stairs?" she asked finally, almost teasing, almost tender. "Every day," I admitted, eyes following a leaf drifting on the wind. She laughed softly, not loud, just the kind of laugh that felt like home. We talked a little, nothing monumental, a lecture, a friend, an upcoming assignment. But the pauses between words carried everything else. Comfort, curiosity, relief. We had crossed that invisible line weeks ago, and now it felt ordinary, like it had always been meant to fit into the edges of our lives. Later, back at her apartment, I watched her reach for her cup, the same one from that first morning, and realized I didn't need grand gestures anymore. The small, familiar ones were enough. A brush of a hand, a glance that lingered, a smile exchanged across a room. That quiet acknowledgement. "I see you. I remember. I'm here." I thought about all the near misses, the unsent texts, the stolen moments in stairwells and lecture halls, and how it had taken months of waiting, pausing, and almost falling to understand that connection wasn't about urgency. It was about consistency, about showing up, day after day, even when it was complicated. As she packed her bag to leave, she paused at the door, looked at me, and said, softly, "Okay." "Okay," I said. And in that one word, we both knew what it meant. Later, I walked past the park bench alone, and a memory hit. 8:47 a.m., steam rising from 2 cups of coffee, the quiet conversation, the brushes of fingers, the air between us holding everything unsaid. I smiled. Quietly, fully. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it had moments like this. Ordinary, fragile, entirely ours. And that, I realized, was enough.